Welcome to She Loves the Grid, where we discuss all things F1. Whether it's happening on the track, in the paddock, or beyond the grid, we'll talk about it all. All right, here we go. Welcome back to She Loves the Grid. I am Claire.
I'm Diane. Welcome.
And welcome. We are fresh off, just an hour or so, maybe not even an hour after that race. And just as it's titled, I just want to go into, you get a penalty, you get a penalty. Oh my.
Everybody gets a penalty. I mean, this whole weekend, I feel drained. I can't even imagine what the drivers feel like because I'm still trying to process things. We don't even know where this podcast is going to go today. It's just like there's so much to talk about.
Okay, we'll never get it done in an hour. You buckle up. Just buckle up. Get ready. It's going to be a ride. So before we get into it, how was your week?
It was pretty good. I mean, after this weekend, to be honest, I don't know what the heck I did this week, but it was a good week. Yay.
I feel you. I think mine kind of like drudgingly went by because it's even though I'm in Germany, I'm still a U.S. employee because I don't have all my visa stuff worked out yet. So close. So I have a 40 weekend. So yeah, I was just kind of just doing everything I could to get to the weekend. So, and it's chilly, nice. It's good weather, but it's just, it's chilly for me. So it's it's good weather.
Well, we're through another week and I'm so excited because I did forget to point out, I mentioned back-to-back races, but actually we have 4 races in 5 weeks. So July is amazing. My birthday weekend is the one weekend we don't have a race, which is good because I'll be busy doing something else, which we'll share later. But yeah, 4 races in 5 weeks, which we need to store this up because then we start heading into the summer break when we'll have major withdrawals. So yeah.
All right. Well, let's get going. So
first off, this week,
First off, they announced it right after SQ3 that poor young man, Delano, passed away during that race at Spa, which is just heartbreaking. I have to say the moment of silence they did at the beginning of the race today, it was just...
It was beautiful. I was so moved. This is not a driver that I know. He's young. He was 18. He's kind of just starting, really trying to work his way up, right, to F1. He's a Dutch driver. And when I saw that, I was like, what? I mean, that is just too young. And to have this be the second death in like 4 years in that same area, which also, has claimed the lives of other drivers in the past. I just felt, I don't know, just heartbroken, absolutely heartbroken. And I haven't looked, to be honest, but I'm curious why they were racing. The weather looked terrible. You couldn't.
And I saw a small video of the wreck. It was, his car just broke apart, and it was... The weather was so horrible. I saw a comparison too of when the F1 race was called in Spa, and because of the rain, and then this one, and the visibility was the exact same, exact same. Why the Formula was it Formula Regional European Championship? Yeah, why that organization didn't call it, but F1 did.
Yeah. These are younger. I think it's on the FIA to. I think it's on the FIA to call it, but whoever was supposed to call it, like, why are you not? You could have finished that, excuse me, under a yellow flag. You could have, if supposedly the rest of the track wasn't as bad as that area. But again, we know that those corners are very tricky, especially in weather. So at the very least, why are you not double yellow flagging that area so they have to go slow? I haven't been able to watch the video. I don't know if I can. I just think it's just so incredibly sad. And there were a lot of drivers, F1 drivers, who were saying, there's got to be changes at this track. Some saying changes to the track, others just acknowledging that they shouldn't have been racing in the weather. But either way, just, oh my gosh, all my sympathy to his family and his friends and the teams, like, just devastating.
Yeah. very much so. I mean, too young, and yeah, it's just okay. Got the sadness out of the way. I did see what you've got next up here. I thought it was really cool about the brought in the solar panels in Austria.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So sorry, like I'm still stuck on what we just talked about. Like to me, that's
you gotta lighten up a little bit.
I know. Sorry. Like I will get okay. Anyway, so F1 is trying something new. So I think a lot of us know that F1 is trying to be net zero by 2030, and they're taking steps. We've talked about what they're doing with the tires. Not only not having the heated blankets, but also lowering the number of tires that the drivers have. But this weekend they brought in a bunch of solar panels, this whole system that was supposed to provide like a 90% reduction or carbon reduction in operation of the paddock and the pit lane and the F1 broadcast area. So none of the teams brought their generators or whatever it is they bring, and they were using hydro-treated vegetable oil biofuel and 600 square meters of solar panels. So if you're watching F1 TV, they did show, I think it was in practice or qualifying on Friday, all of the solar panels.
Yeah, they did.
So that was really cool. I kind of hope that they come out with a report afterwards to like, how did it work? I mean, I didn't see any issues with F1 broadcasting, which is good. So I kind of hope that they bring out, some sort of report to say this is how it went.
Yeah, I'd love to see the report out because I did say they did feature that on one of the F1 TV broadcasts. They showed the panel sitting on top of all the roasts there, and so I think that'd be cool because I mean that just shows the commitment and to the net zero and I mean you've got the sun, might as well use it, right?
Yeah, exactly. I wonder how it worked on the rainy day though on Saturday.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's true. I mean, they got the biofuel too. They got the biofuel too, probably as a backup.
That's true. It was kind of interesting to see the comments on this news story that went out because a lot of people were, saying, well, so what? You crisscross the world. You're here, you were in Europe, then you go to Canada, now you're back to Europe. Like hauling all of that stuff is undoing everything that you're planning to do with this. But it's a process is kind of my thought, right? Like it's not going to all take place at one time. You have to deal with the schedule at a different time. You've got all of these contracts and you have to talk about weather and everything else. So I feel like the schedule will come and they will probably consolidate things a little bit more. But I mean, for now, why can't we try this?
Well, that's part of the net zero. Everything we talk about is the net zero, right? So there's so much they're doing to eat at. It's better than doing nothing.
Right.
As they're working on it by doing that, instead of pulling electricity off the grid that's burning coal and carbon, they're doing something that's this, right? So it's the whole netting it out, right? So they just have to give it time. At least they're making an effort,
Exactly. I think trolls like to be trolls.
Exactly.
Anyways, so this week it feels like an eternity ago because this week I think there was so much happening even before practice and the racing started. But it's like, so we're going to have to get through this, but it also feels like this happened years ago. So earlier this week, F1 started posting articles about Daniel Riccardo taking a seat at AlphaTauri. So we talked about that last week when ESPN posted it. And, we kind of talked about rumors and, do we listen to him? Do we not? But then when you have like F1 start talking about it, do we think like a deal's already done? Do we think that Nyck he doesn't have any more time left to prove himself? Like, what thoughts?
There's even rumors about I saw a rumor of Danny driving an RB in Silverstone, but of course after Checo's showing today, that's a bunch of BS.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and also I think Daniel isn't their first reserve driver. That's Liam Lawson. And so, that's something else is like, do you just skip over him? Because people were even talking about, oh, Checo's sick. Like, get Daniel in that car or put Yuki in that car and put Daniel in an AlphaTauri this weekend. And it was kind of like, Daniel's not even there. I think it was his birthday yesterday, by the way. But there was so much happening, like I didn't even post about it. But anyways, I don't even think he was there, but just the way the internet just exploded.
Crazy.
Yeah.
All the theories.
So many theories. And like you said, to your point, Checo he didn't have a great qualifying, but he had a very good weekend. And I mean, we'll talk about my last minute prediction change, moron that I am, later. But yeah, it's like, give some time. So everything that was being said at the beginning of the week it's just like null and void at this point. Checo's back. Like he's sick. He's still not feeling great. He's hoping he can be better by Silverstone next week. So I think everything's a little too premature. People like to make things happen. But talking about that, so with AlphaTauri, Chatty Cathy, also known as Helmut Marko, was out and about.
I can't tell, like we were saying earlier, if that man's just senile or brilliant, like, or a little bit of both. Like, I can't tell, and a jerk as well.
Yes, no clue. I think he's both, to be honest with you. I think that he seems to come out with stuff like, or maybe they're putting him out there to go on these podcasts or talk to media to like share maybe like a soft launch of what Red Bull and AlphaTauri are planning. So
and then if people don't like it, they can go, "Oh, he's just out of his mind."
More. No, don't listen to him. Don't listen. But so he came out and he said there's going to be a lot of changes at AlphaTauri last year. We already know they're going to have a new principal, and who else is coming over there? Peter Bayer. He's a former president of F1. He's coming over there, but he said there's going to be new sponsors. There's going to be a new name. So they said the direction is clear. You need to follow Red Bull as far as the regulations will allow. So designing the car, letting AlphaTauri design their own car, not good. They don't think that's the way to go. AlphaTauri has used some of Red Bull's old parts from previous seasons, but it sounds like they are really going to try to align the two teams as far as the design of the car as much as they can without getting into trouble.
Maybe it'll take some of those fans out there who don't realize the two teams are connected. Oh my gosh, I've seen some of that too. And they're like, people don't realize the two are actually, like, I don't know how feeder teams, sister teams, whatever you call them, and they'll understand how connected they really are.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy. I'm curious about the name because they did used to be called Toro Rossi, and then they went to AlphaTauri. So I'm curious if they'll go back to Toro Rossi, which would be more along the lines of like Red Bull, like, so we'll see what happens. But he didn't stop there. So our little friend Helmut also spilled the beans and said that Christian Horner is not a fan of Nyck De Vries. He didn't think it was the right thing to bring Nyck onto AlphaTauri. And Helmut said, looks like Christian was right in that category. So then I think he also mentioned that they were not satisfied with Nyck, and they're looking at this as well. And if you're watching our YouTube, you can see my air quotes, but yeah. So boy, I mean, just piling on to Nyck at the beginning of the week. This poor guy, like, I hope he has a whole bunch of family and friends around him, but Max was on the same presser panel as Nyck on Thursday. And in typical, I think this is a nice thing. Don't get me wrong, but Max gets accused of Max-splaining a lot. And I feel like he kind of did go on and on and on about, you're learning, or, we all have to learn. We learn from the mistakes. You just have to talk with your engineers. And once you have one good result, that's going to lead to the next one. Don't get too stressed. Like, there's a whole article about it on F1.com. But Yuki was also saying the same thing. Like, Nick's going to get there, but it just doesn't look like Nyck might have a seat next year.
Yeah, and Nyck didn't have a good day today too. So our whole weekend, he didn't have a good weekend. So
yeah. If you get a chance, I don't want to necessarily go into this, but they did have Max and Yuki out there doing a monster truck race in Austria, and it's really kind of cute. It's fun. If you get a chance, you can go watch it on the Red Bull YouTube channel. But Yuki won. So there you go.
Your national treasure.
Yeah. And then Mercedes. Oh my goodness. Okay. So this actually was another thing that was sad, but actually it was a 3-year-old boy has terminal cancer, and he was supposed to go to Silverstone to see Mercedes, his favorite team. And they realized like he might not be able to do that. He's really fighting the cancer. So Mercedes took one of their cars to him. And what I read online from somebody that was supposedly there, or her husband was there was like 7,000 cars that came through. Like, I don't know if it's like a little parade or like people taking their fancy, not their fancy cars, but you know what I mean? Like people who maybe have like show cars or whatever. But they brought the Mercedes car to right in front of their home. And unfortunately, that little boy did pass away this week. So really sad. But I mean, major props to Mercedes for making that dream come true for them. Yeah, just
that's really cool.
Yeah, I again, I do think that the culture at Mercedes seems to be pretty good. Lewis also made a lot of news this week because he said that there should be a set date on the calendar when teams can start working on their cars for next year. So basically, I'm assuming what he's saying is if you have a team like Red Bull who's winning by 25 seconds every race, they can start planning for next year, right? They can start working on their car, whereas everybody else is trying to make changes now so that they can be competitive, and they don't have time probably to really be thinking about what do we need to do for next year. You can't design next year's car until you figure out what's wrong with this year's car and what's going to work. Exactly. But of course, like Christian Horner, Max, they didn't like that. Max like, well, we weren't talking about that when Mercedes was winning all those years.
What I thought was interesting is there's been a lot of fans again that are talking about, now that Lewis is losing, he's complaining, blah, blah, blah. Max didn't this, Red Bull didn't that. But then they dig up an article that in 2015 shows Horner saying, it's unfair. The FIA should look into this dominance that Mercedes has, and they should look into this. And it's like, yeah, they did.
Yeah,
they did. I mean, I wasn't, watching back then, but it was interesting to see that and go, no, it's not that way. So stop saying that just because they're dominating now that they didn't complain when they weren't dominating.
Yeah. Exactly. No, Christian Horner is a complainer all day long. And you say Max is also like in his car, especially. So I can't imagine for a second that they were not complaining, whether it's publicly or even in, privately within the principal chats or whatever. Like, no. Okay. Ferrari, they worked around the clock to get their upgrades ready. So they had new front wing.
Yeah, it was their wing. They were, in fact, F1 TV was talking about how they changed the shape of the wing, and then they worked on their floor. Yep.
It was pretty minute too. But again, those minute changes are going to they can make big changes on the track. And I think this weekend it probably did. And then Charles is talking about contract extensions with Ferrari.
Yeah, they said he was already starting to talk about that. Which makes me wonder, I forgot about that. I wrote that down because they were listening to it. That makes me wonder about some of the stuff today in the race about what they were doing with Sainz and Charles. I wonder if that has something to do with the extensions.
Yep. And last week too. So McLaren also had upgrades this week, and definitely think those are paying off. Now, I'll say this now, but like, this is a track that Norris has always done well at. He's been on the podium twice. He just nails it at this track all the time. But for sure, their upgrades help. So they had a whole plethora of upgrades. So a reprofiled floor edges, which I always think is so interesting because who else had the edges changed on their car? It might have been Mercedes or Aston Martin. Not this week, but in previous weeks. So just those little things of like, having your edge change can make a difference. So anyways, those two things, side pods, the engine cover, and the diffuser. And so like last week, wait, it wasn't last week, right? No, we had a week off last week. In Canada, Logan didn't get the upgrades for Williams. So in this week, only Lando's car had the upgrades. So Oscar did not have those upgrades. So again, like we talked about last time, with Logan not getting the upgrades with Williams, want to make sure that it works. I think it worked.
I think it worked. Yeah.
I think Oscar's going to get those next
first, as slow as they started this year, just kind of, I mean, like you said, it's a good track for him, but I was pretty impressed, really impressed with them. And like in McLaren's got some stuff. It'll be interesting to see how they do the rest of the season.
I completely agree. And they have another upgrade coming in Hungary. So they, again, like Mercedes are really, and Ferrari are just putting their foot down and like, let's make these changes. But it's cool that, I mean, we could actually see it on the track. The other thing that came out this morning is Lando lost the right to review his penalty in Canada. So that unsportsmanlike penalty, that would have put him back in the points. It doesn't surprise me. I was kind of like, I mean, I got up at 5 a.m. to watch the pre-show, and I was kind of like, I would have been ticked off if they had allowed Lando or maybe reverse that penalty, but you don't reverse that, give that to Sainz back in Australia. So it wasn't surprised that they didn't, let him have that. So, okay. The other huge piece of news that came out on Monday, which feels like a lifetime ago, huh?
Maximum effort. I love Ryan Williams. Ryan Reynolds. I love him. I love him. Maximum effort. That's the name of his investment thing. Maximum effort. So
I love it. So if you live under a rock, the investment group that Claire just mentioned includes Ryan Reynolds, Rob McElhaney, I don't know how if you say it, and Michael B. Jordan have invested 200 million euros for a 24% equity stake in Alpine. So that values that team at 900 million euros. And I think a couple weeks back I had mentioned like the price of these teams is getting closer or at $1 billion. Like the amount of money all of a sudden coming into this sport is insane. But one thing I know a while back, I had mentioned I listened to a podcast with the Renault CEO, and he was talking about how they were committed to putting all this money into the F1 team, but also like the team has to perform. And then we know what he said before the Miami race and all of that stuff. So I think this kind of keeps that money pumping into Alpine, but without Renault having to be the main provider of that money. So I don't know. I think that is pretty darn cool. I think it's going to definitely help them get to the front, which is what they really want to see. I also think it's kind of interesting. So if you don't know this investment group, they have invested in other sports teams, and Wrexham football team in England is one of their big ones because they finally got out of whatever league they were in and bumped up to the next one. And so I think there's a lot of hope for this, but that investment group actually tried to purchase or get a stake in a major league baseball team in the US. And I think it was the Senators. I could be wrong, but I think it was the Senators, and it didn't work out. So then it was like they jumped to F1. So
I'm excited because I love. I mean, I'm a big Deadpool fan. Like I absolutely love Deadpool, and I love Ryan Reynolds and just about everything. Him and Blake Lively. I'm not a big celeb follower. You know that, but those two and how they just because me and sarcasm is just like that's my second language.
Yeah.
And what he does in just about every movie he's in, I love it. And just anyway, just to see him investing in this and the fact that we could potentially see him at races, which means I am going to have to be at that race. I'm going to have to be at any race that he's at. I'm going to have to. There's a chance I can beat him. I'm going to have to invest in the money to be in that paddock. Like I have to be in that paddock.
Yes. Oh, I can't wait to see them on the grid. And I think that Hollywood factor, I mean, some people are not going to like it. They already say there's too many people, Hollywood names, but we don't know if they're fans or not fans. What I think will be interesting to see is because they don't even have a quarter of a stake. Like they're just shy of a full quarter of a stake in the team is how much input they have or how much, they'll be able to influence anything in the team. But still, overall, I think it's amazing. So that was major, major news. Okay, for Williams, just really quickly, they announced that they're going to have a special livery for Silverstone and Hungary to celebrate their 800th Grand Prix. So
800.
I know. Insane? And when you think about it, Monaco, remember how we said that was the 150th race for Haas? 150, 800? Like
800. Just think about how many years that is. Like 800. We were talking. I think we're gonna have to make Williams as our next team to spotlight, just because of the history that Mercedes was. So like Mercedes in and out, people were thinking they've been around forever, but they actually had stepped up for so long to be your 800th Grand Prix. That's on my list. I'm researching them next. I kind of have a love for them in the way because it was Claire Williams and Claire and all that, but I definitely have to look at this one.
I love Williams, and I would love to have that deep dive into them. So they started as a constructor back in 78. They have 7 driver championships and 9 constructor championships underneath them. So definitely a big history. So what was interesting, the reason why they're going to do this livery at 2 races is because Silverstone should technically have been their 800th Grand Prix, which would have been perfect because they are an English-based team, English racing, all of that stuff. And so that would have just, you can't plan that any better. But because Imola got canceled, Hungary is actually their 800th race. So they're going to use it in England because it's technically, like kind of their home race. And then they'll run it in Hungary for the actual 800th race. So I can't wait to see it. It says that it pays livery. I'm going to read this part, but the livery for their home race next week pays homage to the squad's British heritage and their late founder, Sir Frank Williams. And then they're going to add a special emblem in Hungary, which I'm sure will focus more on the actual 800th race. But they have a whole bunch of stuff planned for Silverstone. Wish we could go there. I'm still dying to find out which golf livery won because I'm obsessed. My thing is, I love the one-off liveries. Give me a special livery. Like it
is because it's fashion for the cars, Diane. You in fashion, it's car fashion. So that's
exactly. I love it. I love it. So just 2 other quick things. So we'll talk about this, especially more towards the end of when we talk about the race. But Logan had the upgrade on his car this week, and I think based on the race, we can see how that turned out. But I would highly recommend that everybody go to the Beyond the Grid podcast and listen to James Vowell's interview on there. It was so interesting. And he goes into a lot of detail about his thoughts behind the smaller teams having more money in their cost cap. And it's so interesting because he talks about how infrastructure comes into play, where you have the ability to say cut your carbon or wind tunnels and that sort of thing. And a lot of teams, the bigger teams and Aston Martin, who we see moving into their new facilities this year, and they're talking about their wind tunnel is getting closer to being done. That money that was all spent before 2020, they are all benefiting. Whereas a team like Williams, they don't have the resources in-house to do things like cutting the carbon. So they have to outsource, and they're paying 3 times as much because back in 2020, they didn't have the money for this. But for Aston Martin, all that infrastructure that is going into place and we're seeing the results of this year was paid for prior to the cost cut. So it's a super, super interesting interview. And he really is very passionate about it. He goes into a lot of detail, but it makes so much sense what he's saying. It just makes so much sense. There's no way for these smaller teams now that the cost cap is in place to be able to do these kind of things or to build facilities to allow them to do some of the things that the bigger teams are doing. And so that distance, this disparity is going to just get further and further apart. So
no, that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Anyways, on to the race weekend.
I know we said we were going to do much about practice, but I do want to call out that Max did complain during practice.
You have to be on record every podcast about that.
But he did. I've got it there. Max complains on tire grip.
Max is just trying to get it right at the start.
And we already started with track limits. We already started with a bunch of track limits during practice. I've got it in there. Max was medium overtakes with fastest lap, track limits. Signs, stop, track limits. There's track limits already starting during practice.
Absolutely.
And they're like, what do you mean? It's so hard to go. And even Max was like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. He was complaining about that big time.
And I did mark in there, I forget what he said, but I did say that Yuki is adorable during practice too, because he was saying something really cute during practice. So I went, Yuki is adorable.
I wish I could remember it too. Yuki is a global treasure. I'm just telling you. He really is the cutest. Okay, let's go to Q1. So if you remember, Q1 was setting the grid for Sunday's race. So like you noted, everybody was on soft tires. We had Bottas spinning out almost immediately, and track times being deleted like mad. God, I mean, you have some in here, but it's like, I mean, just start naming drivers, and they probably had a lap time deleted.
Yeah, it was like Carlos and Max deleted, Gasly, then it was reinstated, and then K-Max was deleted, and then Sargent and Bottas got identical times, and then Stroll was moving. It was crazy how many times. I mean, at the very, very end, after all the qualies, 47 times had been deleted.
Yep.
47.
That's insane. That is absolutely insane. Like, it just crazy to me. And after Q1 ended, they were still deleting lap times from 5 minutes before it ended. It didn't change the drop zone at all, but something at that time when that was brought up on F1 TV, one of the commentators said something that you have been saying for a while. Is like they have cameras everywhere. Like, you have this technology. Why does it take so long to go through all of this stuff? And one of the commentators said, listen, there's other sports that utilize technology to immediately spot, whatever it is. And he specifically referenced the Hawkeye in tennis. And if you watch tennis, I do, I'm a big tennis fan. You see the ball. You see, here's the line, right? Here's the outline. And they have a little graphic with the ball. Like, it shows you immediately where it is. So why does F1, with all their money, all the money that's coming in, are they not investing in this type? And we'll get into more about how that was playing out today in the race. But how are you not investing in that?
I know, exactly. I mean, come on, the whole Canada, remember, we were all held up because of all the closed circuit TVs were offline. With all the closed circuit TVs and today's AI technology, it would be so easy to draw the lines and have the lines be able to judge where the car is and be able to see, did the entire car, all four wheels, go over the line and be able to call it. And if you don't want it to be the purveyor and it be the thing that judges it as the final say, it at least then has a human be able to pull it up and go, now you make the final decision. And all they had to do is make a quick click. Yes, that's a penalty. No, it's not. Yes, that was out. No, it's not. And it's a quick yes or no. And then it just pops up on the screen.
Yeah.
And then it brings it up to the exact frame in the camera that shows all the angles. Like, so simple. Yeah. I could program that.
Claire, you need to get a job. Tell the FIA. Tell the FIA, like, you need to be in on this, because it's maddening. It's absolute madness. And you even go back to the podium where Fernando, remember, like, he was not on the podium, or it was Russell. I don't even know at this point.
It was Fernando. It was my man.
But it was like, but didn't also they gave it to Russell, and then Russell took the trophy back. Okay. Anyways, agreed. It's absolute nonsense. But out in Q1, we had Yuki, Zhou, Sargent, Kevin Magnussen, and Nyck. And again, as we had mentioned earlier, Nyck did not have a great first few days for sure. He was dead last to start the race today. So in Q2,
more times late.
Yeah, more lap times deleted. But I think this is important to point out now. So you talked about practice and Max talking about getting angry about his lap times being deleted. In Q2, Q1, he and Checo constantly having lap times deleted, right?
And he was complaining about it. He was complaining about the track limits. This is ridiculous. You know, this is a bad spot. He was complaining about, I think, turn 10.
Well, 9 and 10 for sure, but 10 was, I think, where Max was primarily going out. But Checo had all 3 of his fast lap times deleted for track limits. All 3 of them in this.
And at 3:48 left, he got that time deleted, and it put him at P15.
Yep. So he was out. Russell was out. I mean, Russell was like a non-entity this weekend, honestly.
No, what the heck?
I was like, even there? I didn't see him in interviews. I didn't see him anywhere. So Russell, Ocon, Bottas, Piastri, and Perez all out. And Perez
at the end, Checo, Ocon, and Piastri's times had been deleted. So that's one of the reasons why they were out, because their times were deleted because of track limit.
Insane. Absolutely crazy. For Checo, this was his 4th race in a row that he missed Q3. And I think 5 out of 9 races that he's missed Q3. So even on Friday, the chitter chatter was going on about he needs to be replaced. Like,
I think that's what was shortly after that somebody posted like an article from one of those like sites that it's like, oh, you know, and next week it's going to be Danny and an RP19, you know, and I'm like, really? I don't think so. He's not
like, can we stop overreacting? But Albon was looking good. I mean, made it into Q3 again. Okay, so Q3, I don't even know what happened.
It was like I kept putting this one's up, this one's up, this one's up. I was just like feverishly typing all the backs and how quickly people were moving up and jumping ahead, and
it was amazing. It was amazing.
And then Albon's time was deleted.
Poor Albon. He had a rough time, and we could talk about a little bit later. But yeah, so it ended up on pole for Sunday. Max, Charles, finally on the front row. I have to say, I was a little bit like, thank you for not getting pole. It just drives me nuts when he gets pole and then it doesn't work out. Carlos, who had a great Friday, he was looking really good, I think. Then Norris, who, like we said, he loves this track. And then Hamilton, Stroll beating Alonso. I think that Stroll hears the chatter about, you know, he needs to start stepping it up and blah, blah, blah. And he always seems to come back. So anyways, that was Friday. Then on to Saturday, the sprint shootout. Woo! Extra points, which some of the drivers really need.
It started out, there was a heavy rain overnight, so the track was damp. Okay, all I got to say, and I wrote this in here, is like F1 TV is doing that podcast, like WTF. What's up with Dr. Helmet? Like,
Helmet just does whatever he wants. He
talks. He just comes out. For people who don't have F1 TV, he comes out. He stares at the commentators who are sitting there talking with their mics, and you know the cameraman's got a massive camera on his shoulder, right? Yes. Massive camera, and the cameraman's looking over at him. And they're talking, and he's just standing at them like deer in the headlights, looking at the cameraman, looking at them, and it's just like, well, and just walks right in between them, right through the middle of the broadcast. And I'm just
like, second time, yeah.
I'm like, you know they're broadcasting. The drivers are required to do stuff. People, if they want to stop them, stop and talk to them. Like Christian stops and talks to them. Like, are you just that dense or just that much of a jerk?
Yeah.
Or is it both?
I think Helmet DGAF. I can't say it, otherwise you're going to put an explicit on our but he DGAF at all.
Yeah. Anyway, let's get out there. That one just kind of, I sat there for a little bit going, I missed half what the commentators were saying for a couple of seconds because I was literally stunned.
Anyway. Well, you and I think, were texting at that point because I'm like, what? what is happening? So anyways, they declared it a wet track because like you said, it had been raining. So they were able to utilize used tires. They did not have to go with the mandatory mediums in Q1 and Q2. And I had initially missed that because I was like, I don't even remember what driver it was, but a lot of them were on softs. And I'm like, why are they on soft? This is mandatory mediums. But then it was like, oh yeah, it's because it's a wet track. They are allowed to use used tires. So some of them did. So a lot of them were on softs, I think. So almost immediately my heart was breaking. And I was like, this is my life.
I could hear you screaming from Berlin.
Yep. Yeah. Friday as a Ferrari fan, you're living the life and you're loving everything and it's great. And now Saturday morning, almost as soon as they left the pits, and mind you, the qualifying times are shorter versus in a sprint qualifying or a shootout than they are in regular. And so almost immediately Sainz is like, I have a brake-by-wire issue, guys. Can you check? Crickets. Nobody from Ferrari responds. So Sainz has to say like, hey guys, I'm waiting, say something. And then they finally were like, yeah, box, go ahead, box. I'm with Carlos this weekend and he is too.
Remember, we don't want an explicit warning.
No, I'm not going to say anything nasty. But WTF, like what is wrong with Ferrari's engineers? What is wrong with the communication? That is absolutely unacceptable. You have such a short amount of time to get a lap in. And thank goodness, like this is one of the shortest, laps on the calendar, but still you have a brake-by-wire issue and you're not responding to your driver. Hello.
Know, right?
Absolutely insane. So he goes into the box, He goes into the pits he goes. So yeah, it was insane. So last
time he was in it for so long too. I was panicking how long he was in there.
I had kind of resigned myself that he was not coming back out. I know. Like, well, we start at the back for the sprint today. He's not coming back out.
But so much was going on, and then Max's time was deleted for track limits. So again, here we have track limits again, which makes me so sus about today. But
Perez also had lap times deleted, so not good.
Called for calls impeding by Charles. He called out that he got impeded by Charles.
Charles did impede him though. He was right on the racing line, and he was not on a fast lap. And so I, like Sainz with Pierre in Canada. Charles was on the racing line and he wasn't going fast. So you know what? That was a good call. So Sainz, it was like a little bit more than a minute left.
Yes.
Comes out.
Holy cow.
And you know what? Last night I had to go back and rewatch because initially I couldn't hear on his outlap. He was so mad at his engineer. And so last night I went back to listen because I couldn't hear what he said. So what the engineer said was mode slow. I think did I write that down? I don't know. Anyways, it was like mode slow. And Carlos is like, no mode slow. He came out of the pit. He was leaving his pit box with 1 minute left. There's no mode slow here. No, F you, Ferrari engineer. And so he went on. He had one lap to do it, and he ended up in freaking first place.
Yeah, he got the fastest sector. He fastest first sector, and then he got into first. He got first. And I was like, whoa! He just came out like just.
But he needed to.
And on new tires. I'm not new tires, but like the tires weren't warm yet. Like he just went out there and just blew it away and got the fastest first sector.
Yeah, it would have been a travesty if he hadn't, because like I said, on Friday, Sainz was looking so good in practice, in quali. For him to have missed out on Q2, SQ2 or whatever, it would have been awful. But again, what in the heck are the Ferrari engineers thinking? Mode slow? No. And then after Sainz said no, they were like, okay, one lap. I'm like, shut up. Just get off my radio. Anyways, so out in SQ1 was Zhou, Piastri, Hamilton, Bottas, and Sargent. So
this is like one thing that Sargent's always out.
Sargent's always out. Yeah, this was not a good qualifying for him. But Hamilton had a lap time that was deleted that would have had him into SQ2.
Yeah.
And Charles, who cannot drive that Ferrari in a mix of like wet, dry conditions, he said that after the sprint on Saturday, he cannot figure that car out in those wet, dry conditions at all. We've seen it in other races, but he was in by 0.001 of a second. 0.001.
Then he got the impeding. So, yeah. And I messed up. When I saw the impeding thing over this morning, I was like, oh yeah, that was for yesterday. That wasn't for today. That's why I did my predictions the way I did, because I was like, I had my brain messed up.
Yeah. Anyway. But I mean, it was honestly the right call. So he had a three-place grid drop for the sprint Saturday afternoon. But in SQ2, I think you noticed this when we were chatting while we were watching, but Russell reported a hydraulic issue right at the end of SQ1, and he wasn't coming out.
No, and he was just, that was it, because he was like right at the big, it was like just as they were ending SQ1 and going into SQ2, he said, I'm having a hydraulic issue.
Yeah.
And they're like, it was like chaos was going on, and even the commentators like, he just reported a hydraulic issue, and he's like, went to the garage, and he didn't make it back out.
No, so that was it for him. He was out starting 15th in the sprint. What I thought was interesting, again, we had constant lap times being deleted, and so with 2 minutes left in SQ2, your top three was Ocon, Verstappen, and Magnussen. I just got a kick out of that because I'm like, what in the world? But it was because all of the lap times were just kept getting deleted.
Did you see the thing with the car with the tire not getting taken out of the way, and that just boom, and it's lucky nobody got hurt.
Yeah, so that was Nico's Haas. He had gone into the pits, and the front driver tire guy was just kind of not standing there. He was squatting down, but he had the tire still in front of him, and he was turned this way. Magnussen is going out this direction, and you know how quickly they peel out of there. And the guy did not move the tire. I was shocked at how much air his car got.
So much. Like,
I thought it was going to go.
I thought it was going to flip too. Me too. I thought it was going to flip. It was insane. It's just like, holy cow. But those tires are big. I mean, those tires are massively wide. Yeah. So, but still, I'm surprised the car didn't sustain any damage. Like,
that's what I was just going to say. I was shocked because that is Haas's luck. Is like Nico's having this amazing, qualifying session, and that's Haas's luck that he would break his car in a pit stop.
But we go into SQ3, and that's what I put on caps. 2 Haas's at SQ3. Holy cow! I had 2 Haas's, the 2 Red Bulls, the 2 Aston Martins, and 2 Ferraris. Like, oh my God! Talk about a 2x2. Like, holy cow!
I thought 2x2 when I was watching, but it was insane. And Hülkenberg, like, having another amazing qualifying, like, he can really pull the lap, quick laps.
Absolutely.
It is amazing. What else do we have? Like, Mercedes, they're just, I mean, I think all weekend I was kind of like, Mercedes is not looking good. But then Hamilton was like 5th, in qualifying the day before. So it's like they are, but they aren't.
I felt them and even Aston Martin were just kind of like almost phoning it in for the weekend. It's like their cars were carrying them, but they were just kind of blah. Like, if it weren't for them having really good cars and really good upgrades, I don't know, something was off on both teams to me this weekend. I don't know what it was. Both teams were just, and they're both of my teams, but they're just a little meh.
Something was a little, definitely off. I think like Lance, and when you look at where they finished and stuff, it's like, that's fine, but we're not used to them being fine, especially in the last, few races. And Lance had a good one, but Hülkenberg for sure had an amazing qualifying.
Absolutely.
Shootout. So then that's at the grid for the sprint. So it was Max, Checo, Norris, Hulkenberg, Sainz, Charles, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Sprint race. We talked about Charles had the 3-place grid drop. So, what I thought was interesting is I guess the FIA actually came out and said that the communication between engineer and driver could be better. Because what I was thinking, and I meant to ask you this yesterday because I didn't look it up, but this is an ongoing issue for Charles and Javi. The communication, Javi is not telling Charles what he needs to know. And this is not Charles' first penalty this year because Javi is not telling him that there's people coming.
Monaco.
Yeah. That's just one. I feel like it's happened, more than that. That's what I wanted to look up. So maybe I'll look that up this afternoon. But I just thought this is, they need to work this out. They have got to figure this out. But anyways, so you and I were chatting at the start of the race with Bottas on the inters when everybody else, no, he was on mediums and everybody else.
Yeah. That was so interesting. I was like, and it's so slick. And then he's like, immediately, one lap in because he can barely hold on, is right back into the pits. Like,
yeah, they weren't even one lap in. They were on the formation lap, and they're like, box, like, which sucks for the other drivers because he could not keep his car from sliding, and Max and everybody is up at the front waiting for because Sargent couldn't go around him. That would be an illegal move. And so here comes Sargent finally once Bottas went into the pits. I mean, horrible, horrible strategy.
And to me, it feels so unfair to Sargent, too, because now he's stuck all the way back there.
Yeah.
Waiting on him.
Absolutely. So at the get-go, Max, who's normally really good off the start, did not get a good start. Checo
I'm sorry.
Claire's loving that.
Claire he pushed me. He shoved me. What's wrong with Max?
that was good.
I may or may not have had a little bit of fun with all the memes. Even ESPN putting those two up. Like, that's been like the meme of all memes the last couple of days.
Seriously, though. Well, we all know that Max, he will do what he does, but if it's done to him, he gets petty as all get out. And
I love it. So Checo shoved me, he pushed me off, and then Checo, what's wrong with Max?
Yeah, that was pretty good. Hulkenberg, though, making moves kind of at the beginning, moving up to second place. I was like, what's going to happen with this? But poor Lando. Oh, my gosh. Poor Lando. Just like in Spain where he had an issue right at the jump, he immediately is at P10. I was watching after the third, where they kind of were all bunching up at turn 3, which was a huge issue initially. And I'm like, looking for the papaya car. And I'm like, where's Lando? Where's Lando?
I didn't even know until we saw when you and I were talking, like, I got to watch the replay because I have no idea what happened. And then when the replay happened, I was like, oh, that's what happened. The anti-stall. It's like, that's what happened because he just all of a sudden wasn't there. And then, there he is.
Yep.
It's like, where's Waldo?
Exactly. But he had to, like, when you watch the replay, he had to slow down because the 2 Red Bulls, that's when Max was accusing Checo of pushing him off. And then I think there was a couple other cars near him. So he really had to back off, Lando did. And so when that happens, your revs, like, they drop like crazy. And so then the anti-stall kicks in so you don't just completely come to a stop. But apparently what happens when that anti-stall kicks in is you have to, like, do the clutch and you've got to get everything going again. There was just nothing he could have done. So and all those cars bunched up right there. It was just like, okay, whatever. The battle between Leclerc and Ocon, though, was pretty awesome. Like, amazing. Ocon, I think he's a good defender. I think he's always kind of elbows out, and every time Charles was trying to get past him, he was like, "Nope, not today."
This weekend had a lot of good battles. I have to admit, this was like a fun weekend of battles. So we saw that both in the sprint and in today's race. So we saw a bunch of the battling, and it was nice to see battles without wrecks too. To see that like set strategy and the back and forth and back and forth. It was really cool to watch.
Yeah, I thought it was amazing. There was a lot where I was holding my breath because those wheel to wheel battles are so exciting, but also like it's one false move and it's over. So yeah, that's kind of crazy. But speaking of battles, you had your Aston Martins kind of fighting each other.
I know. I was like, what's up with that? That was an interesting one. Yeah. And then later on, Hamilton and K-Mag going after each other too. Yeah. It was like lots of battles going on.
Yeah, for sure. But then I thought it was funny what Stroll said.
Yeah. I thought that was an interesting one.
The
first time fighting, I was like, what's that? Yeah. I think I wrote WTF, didn't I? Yeah.
Yeah. But that's where I'm like, so obviously Stroll was ahead of Fernando. Fernando, I think he was very generous in Spain, but I think he's, wasn't necessarily wanting that to continue with Stroll in front of him. But I do think, like, this is what I was saying earlier, is I think when people start talking about Lance and kind of dissing him and saying, like, he needs to go, he comes back and, he gets in front of Fernando and it's like, that's it. Like, yeah, I don't know. That was
here. I mean, I know it's whatever F1 TV puts on. We didn't hear much from Fernando other than asking about the track drying at one point. And I'm like, why is he asking about the track drying? This would not be a good time for him to change his tires. Like, what was the point? The point's moot there. Like,
yeah, just trying to get a feel for what the drivers are feeling, I guess. But I mean, at some point, what lap was it? 16. Russell did pit for slicks. At that point, they were they were taking a chance. And what was funny is all of a sudden, around lap 19, lap 20, I think the teams were watching George, and a bunch of them got called in. And this is where I lose my mind because I did not think that was a good idea for several of those cars, like at all. Like,
I agree.
And we'll talk about that in a second because I was losing my mind. But Stroll around lap 17, he overtook Hülkenberg. And, we've said this a million times, like Haas is great on that one lap pace, but they just start going backwards once the actual race, or in this case, the sprint starts happening. So he did good. Hülkenberg did good. He got points, but whatever.
Yeah, I think some of the pitting when they did was stupid. I mean, just no other good word for it. Like,
yeah,
you that late in the race, and you're not gonna. I don't care that you went on slicks. I don't care where you were. You were not gonna get. These people were not in cars that were fast enough to catch up the time they needed after a pit.
Yeah, so there was only 24 laps in the sprint. And most of these cars were pitting on lap 19 and 20, and it was cold and it was still a little bit wet in some areas. How in the world are you going to get your tires to the point that they need to be to get back up? So Albon, that's where I was ticked. Last week, brilliant strategy, or last week in Canada, brilliant strategy by Williams. Yesterday, horrible strategy. He was in sixth. I think I wrote down seventh, but he was in sixth place. And there was no way he was going to get his spots back. He ended up, third? I don't even know where he ended up. 12th, 13th, 14th. Like, he just started going backwards. Horrible. He would have absolutely had points if they had just left him out there. You only had 5 laps left.
Yeah, 13th.
Yeah, you only had 5 laps left. Just maintain it. Everybody's in the same position. And afterwards, Russell even said in one of his interviews that if a lot of those cars hadn't followed him into the pits, they probably would have scored points. And I think that's 100% true for Albon. Absolutely 100% true. But it worked out in Russell's favor. So from the moment he went in, and he was back in like 15th or 16th place when he went in, and even I think when he came out, and then within minutes, we rewatched the end of the shootout yesterday, and I was like, just watch where Russell ends up. So all of a sudden he's, 15, 16, somewhere in there, and then he's 11th, and then he's 10th, and then he's 9th. Like, what in the world? He almost caught Ocon at the very end. He missed out by
0.09 seconds. Yeah.
0.09 seconds to get into 7th. And from where he was just a few laps before.
Crazy.
That's insane. But I think that in part, good move, obviously, by Mercedes, but all of those other teams pulling their drivers into the pits helped Mercedes get a point. They got the final point in the shootout or in the sprint.
Yeah, for 0.009 seconds. Yeah.
Yeah. Just go back and watch those last 5 or 6 laps and just watch the side and see where Russell was and where he ends up. Absolutely insane. And then you had Stroll and Alonso battling it right till the end. Craziness. Piastri and Leclerc overtake Gasly. I mean, so much was happening. It was insane. But as soon as Max crossed the line, what does Mr. Petty Pants say to his people?
Oh, yeah.
After they congratulate him, whatever, he says, we have to talk about what happened on turn 1 in lap 1. Because he can't let it go. Checo pushed me off. We need to have a talk. Blah, 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 blah. But as soon as they got out of their cars, they kind of went off to the side, Checo and Max, and had a little conversation. And Checo's story is he had no idea Max was up beside him that quickly. He thought he was still slightly behind him, and he did not know that he was pushing him out. And Max said he's going to trust that that's what really happened. So they moved on. Claire's rolling her eyes for those of you not watching our YouTube. But supposedly they
might have been able to hear that eye roll on the podcast. So.
But I think too, so talking about, you talked about Aston Martin battling each other, then you had, the Red Bulls. For Ferrari, it was really, to me, Saturday, 2 very different cars. Sainz looked amazing. He ended up on the podium. He was 3rd in the sprint. Looked so good. He had that brake-by-wire issue in the morning and, started 5th and ends up on the podium. And Charles, where did he end up? In the shootout, 13th?
Yeah, he was 12th.
12th. Okay. 12th. So, I mean, horrible day. He ends up in 12th. He can't figure the car out.
And started
let's get to today, because today, my gosh.
And Charles started 9th.
Yeah. So he lost spots. He can't drive.
Then we have today.
Today. I don't even know how to talk about today. So
you get a penalty. You get a penalty. I have a penalty for you. Everyone gets a penalty. Practically everybody. About half the grid.
Half the grid, almost. 9 of them. 9 of them got track limit violation penalties.
And then you got 2, even including a 10-second one.
Who? Yuki?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Yuki got something. Did he get another one besides that? Or did they ever come back and say, remember the one that we were talking about?
I'm not sure if they came back and said, because they were taking forever to get back to everybody on those.
Yeah.
So,
They're ridiculous. Okay, we have lots of opinions on that, so stay tuned. But to start it off, Magnussen and De Vries, who I think were on the last row anyways, they ended up starting from the pits. K-Mag changed his suspension. De Vries changed his rear wing and parts of his power unit. So I think everybody was on mediums except for Alonso and Bottas. And this was the other alternate title I have for this podcast was something about tattletaling, because everybody was on their radio telling on each other.
Oh my gosh, right? It's like, and Norris spent the whole time like, oh, he's off again. Oh, he's off again. Can you tell him he's off again? He's off again. He's off again. Oh my gosh. Why wasn't anyone telling him, Max?
Charles wasn't close enough to see what was going on there. He wasn't. But I will say, Lando, I watched his interview after the race, and he said he had totally admitted. He said he was full on commentating about Hamilton's race. And he said he had gone off at least 20 times and Hamilton had gone off in one lap 5 times, which right there would be a penalty. So Norris fully admits that he was all over that. But anyways, the beginning of the race was good.
Yeah.
I thought. I mean,
yeah, I thought so.
Leclerc.
I thought so. It was a nice start. I liked how it started out.
Yeah, it was so good. Leclerc was aggressive. Hamilton was aggressive. Hamilton got past Lando really quick. That's how Lando was able to spot.
And we ended up with that like almost immediate yellow flag though, because Yuki got hit. The front of it got tapped when it with debris on the curb, and it started out with when the gravel that brings up the yellow flag. It's like, oh no, that's not what brought up the yellow flag. There was debris on the curb from the earlier hit.
Yeah,
on his front
his wing.
His front wing, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this was just not Yuki's weekend. I mean, like probably by the time he was getting all of those penalties, he's just like
Norris was calling track limits on Lewis early, like lap 7. He was already starting to telling him early.
Oh yeah. I mean, the track limits were nuts all the way. And early on you had the Ferraris battling each other. And part of me sometimes hates when the teammates battle, because it's like you're degrading your tires faster, like but Sainz definitely was the faster car between the two. And so he said, like, I want past Leclerc, and his engineer said, his engineer asked him about his pace, and Sainz replied, I think you can see it. Like, he was right up on Leclerc, and they were told not to attack.
I'm shocked that they wouldn't let him pass it, because like if he's got the faster car, if he could have passed it, he would have had the chance while the gap was small to catch Max. Like, and obviously Leclerc couldn't do it. No. Obviously. So why not, if he's sitting there on his tail and they're just like, no, don't do it. Don't fight him. Don't chase him. Like, oh my gosh, why? I don't understand. If you have a chance of P1, why not go for it?
Exactly. And I don't understand that at all. And Carlos said something in his interview after the race, is that, he feels that he plays the team, the team game. That's not his word, that's mine, but he feels like he's doing what the team asked him to do, and he's not rewarded for it. Like, he should have been at that point. And granted, like, maybe Charles gets the pace later and you can switch the cars, like keep the cars close, but let the faster car through. I don't care if it's Sainz driving it or if it's Leclerc driving it. Let the faster car through. Why are we giving priority to Charles? And maybe it has something to do with those contract negotiations. They want to keep him as their main driver, but Carlos was so strong on this track from Friday on. You should have let him through. Let him see what he can do.
He's such a good strategist too. Like, I don't understand.
He's so on it. He's very aware of what is happening. But I think you and I were texting about this during the race, is like, what would have happened if they had let Carlos through? What would Carlos's race have looked like if at that point they had let him through? Now, I'm not saying like Carlos would have, been up there with Max. Max was still, by the end of the race, 26 seconds ahead of everybody, or ahead of Charles. So I'm not saying that he would have, kept up with Max, but maybe you could have had both cars. Like, I don't know. Both could have. I have no idea. But yeah. Anyways, Hülkenberg though.
Oh my God.
This is where I say Haas has like the worst luck, because he was doing good. He was still up there.
His car
lost power. and it was smoking. And fortunately, it really wasn't a big thing, right? I mean, they did do a yellow flag, but he kind of just pulled off into an off ramp or whatever. But I couldn't help but thinking, like, it's got to be so exhausting for him on race day, because he's got that great one lap pace in qualifying, but he spends all of his time defending the cars behind him, and their tires, they're horrible as far as, like, they can't stop them from degrading, it seems, faster than everybody else. So I don't know if it's because he is trying to keep everybody off and he has to defend so much because they don't have that race pace, or what, but it's just got to be exhausting. He was probably happy to be done. I'm sure he wasn't. They're competitors. But so under the yellow flag, virtual safety car, a bunch of the teams in the midfield all pitted their cars. Yep. And when that came out, though, it was too late. Max had already gone past. The Ferraris had already gone past. But they were able to come back around still on the virtual safety car, and they double stack Charles and Carlos. So here's where I get even more mad. You don't let Carlos by when he has the pace. Then you double stack, and you do a really slow pit stop with Charles.
Super slow.
Super slow. It was more than 4 seconds, right? So I think it was 4.3, 4.4 and 4.2. Then you get Carlos in there. So he's having to, like, slow himself down to kind of make sure that double stack works out. And then Carlos comes in, and I think his was 4.2. So another slow pit stop. Get back out there. Carlos is now in 5th place. Like, what? What?
I saw later when he served his penalty, I counted. It was more than 5 seconds.
Oh, I thought it was 6.2, which was funny because I wasn't going to say anything. But then you mentioned, like, I think they did a 6 second and waiting 6 seconds for the penalty. But when Carlos gets back out on the track, he's frustrated because he's like, why didn't we stay out? Super good question on my point. But some of the other commentators afterwards were saying, no, it was smart that they did pit when they did, because, you know, who knows what Carlos's race would have looked like. But honestly, I don't agree with that. I think that Ferrari messed up Carlos's strategy all day, starting with not letting him in front of Charles. Yeah, then you mess him up more with those crappy pit stops. So I still am going to stick with my thing.
That are 2.4 seconds, and you're doing a 4-second pit. That's just ridiculous.
Horrible. Absolutely horrible. And you're double stacking them, and you do that twice. Like, come on. Ridiculous. So horrible. So black and white flags everywhere. It was hard to even keep up. I was trying to take notes of who was getting penalties for track limits. But like we said, 9 of the 20 drivers, and mind you, really 9 of 19 drivers, because Hulk was out early on. So 9 of 19 drivers had penalties for track.
Hamilton, Yuki, Sainz, Albon, De Vries, Gasly, Sargent, K-Mag. All got for track limits, and then I think I'm missing one. But then we also got De Vries got for forcing K-Mag off, and Ocon got unsafe release.
Unsafe release. Yep.
And then Yuki got the second one for track limits, which ended up being a 10-second penalty.
Yeah. And then also for Yuki, we don't know if he got that penalty for whatever that was. Like, hang on. I know I wrote it down someplace because I just had it. And then I was like, oh, shoot. I don't remember what it is. Anyway, so there might have been more. But, I mean, penalties galore. But I will say, like, you had said all weekend, great battles. Like Norris battling with Hamilton, that was another awesome little battle on track. That was maybe that
was crazy.
That was awesome. And I'm like, go Norris. I love to see that. He finally overtook Hamilton. Absolutely incredible. Drivers left and right, what they were telling us, the engineers are on pretty much all the drivers' radios telling them, stay within track limits. We've got warnings. even Checo's engineer a couple of different times was telling him, you need to stay, on track. You've got to stay in place. And you kind of mentioned the battle between K-Mag and Nyck De Vries, where De Vries got that penalty for pushing Magnussen off. And what I think is interesting is these two have been at it for a couple of races now. Like in Canada, it was the same thing where they were wheel to wheel, and then you had Nyck lock up and they had to go into that straight area in Canada, and Magnussen had nowhere to go. And not only did we have Nyck pushing Magnussen off today, but a few laps later, they were again wheel to wheel. So I just kind of wonder if these two are going to continue to do that the rest of the season. It's kind of fun to watch, but I mean, K-Mag doesn't like it, but it is fun to watch.
Here's an interesting thing. I was just checking to see if I could just confirm all the track penalties. Aston Martin has lodged a formal protest, and there's a hearing going on about it with the FIA. The stewards have confirmed over 100 track limit violations occurred during the race. Many of these were registered at the time, and penalties for multiple infringements were handed down to 7 different drivers. However, Aston Martin believes that other drivers committed infringements that went unpunished. And so they've lodged a formal protest that it was not handled out fairly across all the drivers. And there's a current hearing going on right now.
Good. I love that Aston Martin's people are all over this, because remember,
none of their drivers were penalized. They're doing this because it should be fair across all the drivers.
Absolutely. And this is something that you and I were talking about before we started the podcast isn't it odd that Red Bull, who was getting lap times deleted in practice, in qualifying, in the shootout, in the sprint, miraculously was not, well, Checo got a black and white flag with 1 lap left.
1 lap left.
1 lap left. And you could see him going off the track constantly. Absolutely. I am so glad that Aston Martin is doing this, because there's no way, and I'm not saying that they weren't getting dinged, because clearly, they were, but I think a lot was overlooked. And for sure, Checo should have had a black and white flag. 100% should have had a black and white flag. So that's going to be interesting. Whether or not that will change the podium, I don't know. But I think I was telling you when we were talking is Ferrari should be looking at every single lap that is happening, because Sainz should probably be in third. Absolutely be in third. So I'm glad Aston Martin is on it.
Yeah, that's cool. So interesting. It was at 6:30 local time, and I think Austria is the same time as me, and it's 7:00 here as we're recording right now. So we might have to do an update after we're done recording as to what the hearing results in.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, then we'll post about that. But I will tell you, Aston Martin, they have a lot of experience in their team, and just like with that race where they brought a whole, like, here's all of our proof that you did not give the penalties before for this, and Fernando was able to get back on the podium. I'm sure they put their ducks in a row and they have proof. So why the Ferrari people weren't in on that, like, I don't know, but good for Aston Martin. That is all I can say, because even the drivers were like, this is crazy. Hamilton was on his radio so much complaining about it, is anybody else getting penalties, is blah, blah, blah. Toto, for the second time, and Toto does not come on the radio that often during the races, he got on the radio and was like, we know the car is bad. Please drive it. Please drive it.
He was not having it. He was
so over it. And I don't blame you. Like, yes, everybody else is going off and you want it to be fair, but at the same time, you've got to focus on your race. You just worry about you. But I can't believe you said just in this race, there was over 100 penalties for track limits.
Over 100 track limits, over 100 violations.
That's amazing. That is, it's actually ridiculous. And I'm usually one that's like, listen, drivers, you know where the white line is. You're told
The stewards confirmed over 100 track limit violations occurred during the race.
That's insane. That is insane.
So and balance that out. If over 100, and how many does it take to judge a penalty? How is it only 7 drivers then? Yeah. So 5 gets a penalty. So 7 times 5 is 35. If there was over 100, then how is it that we only had 7 drivers with the penalty and 1 twice? That would be 8 penalties. That accounts for 40 of them.
Yeah. Unless they're going to say amongst those 8 drivers, like Hamilton, if what Lando said is to be believed, he was off, 20 times.
There would have been we should have been extra penalties, just like Yuki got. He got penalized.
Well, that's true. That's true. Yeah. I think they have some answering to do. For sure.
To make it fair, they've got to make it fair.
It has to be fair. And there's a lot of stuff that goes around about how Red Bull doesn't get penalized for stuff. And there's a lot of jokes that go around. So now I can't wait to get off our podcast so I can go look at comments. Because there's a lot of jokes about like, oh, Christian Horner sending catering over to, the FIA and the stewards for, overlooking, the penalties. So I think that'll be interesting. And like really quickly, I do kind of want to get to that. So let's just very quickly finish up. The other battle.
Oh my gosh, this is so much.
And we have to talk about Silverstone. But this is major. So, the penalty stuff is major. So we'll get back to that in 1 second. But I do want to call out the battle between Carlos and Checo for third. That was some amazing driving. Carlos ultimately couldn't defend it, but like, holy cow, that battle. I was on like my knees, like, come on, do not like hit each other. I don't want to see either car go out that way, but yeah, absolutely insane. And then on the last lap, Max had to pit to get soft tires so he could get the fastest lap.
I know. Had to.
And, so he was 20 something seconds at 26 seconds or something ahead of Charles. But it's like, why take that chance? I mean, I guess you have enough faith in your pit crew that you're going to get in and out. And he did. It was like 2.4 seconds or something. Super fast. And he got the fastest lap and still finished 2, almost 3 seconds ahead of Charles. But like, why?
For that extra point, like you couldn't just...
I don't even know if it's for the point. I think it's more about he wanted everything. He wanted the pole for qualifying. The pole for the race. He wanted to do that he had pole for the shootout. He had won the sprint. He won golly Moses.
He won it all. Yeah, he won it all.
Yeah, but Lando, okay, going back to the penalties. So Lando did an interview and he's just the cutest sometimes. So he was voted driver of the day, which I thought was great. He finished P5, amazing, another good finish. He's so cute because he's when they told him that on the radio, they're like, "You're driver of the day." He's like, "Aw, that's cute." He's like, "All the papaya fans here today," because just referencing and joking about all the Red Bull fans that wear orange for Max, but he's adorable. And he said in his interview, driver of the day is basically race winner. So I like that he has a good sense of humor about it. But so he and Pierre kind of were doing a joint interview and they were both saying that oh my God, I wish you could see this right now. There's like 2, 4, 6, there's probably like 20 quail that are running across my yard. I'm like, what is happening right now? I wish I could turn. Oh, there's still more. Hang on. Straggler. All the babies are growing up. And I swear to God, there's another one. 20 to 30 quail just ran across my front yard. Anyways, the joys of living in the desert. Anyways, they were saying like the track limits, like that is just wrong because sometimes you're just a millimeter over the line. And that was the case when Carlos got his penalty, his 5-second penalty. He was barely on that white line.
I swear one of them, the one that he got the penalty, one of his wheels wasn't.
Yeah, no, I agree. I completely agree. But then Alex Albon came on, and I thought he gave some great insight into these penalties. So he said the FIA is so slow in giving notice. So Alex heard about his first penalty, or not penalty, but his first notice at lap 20. And he was like, oh, all right, I'm not doing so bad. I guess I'm doing okay. by lap 23, he was officially given a penalty. So he's like, there is no time to react. He did pull back, he said, after lap 20. He kind of pulled back a little bit, but had no idea he was that close to getting an actual penalty. He's like, there's no time for us to react. The FIA is 15 laps behind. And according to Albon, the FIA has said they don't have enough people to monitor this. So full circle, this goes back to our conversation about, having the technology, using something like they do in other sports to be able to quickly see this. I just think that is absolutely wrong. And to not have it be applied fairly, it's just not, it's not okay on so many levels. I can't imagine what those conversations are going to be like with the team principals and the FIA when they have their meetings next week before Silverstone. I'm sure the drivers are going to bring it up because they already weren't happy at all. So
yeah, I think it's ridiculous.
Yeah,
it's absolutely ridiculous. It'll be interesting to see what the results are of today's hearing. I'm going to be watching it like crazy to see what happens.
Me too. But overall, like, I really enjoyed this weekend. I thought, minus all the stupid track penalties, I thought there was a lot of great battles. I think the sprint and stuff was a lot closer than maybe we thought it might be. Even early on, like, I don't know. I just thought this week was a lot of fun to watch. Definitely not a dull moment at all.
Not at all. It was crazy. It was so crazy.
Yeah. So we'll keep you all posted. Well, by the time you hear this, it'll all be done, but that's okay.
We'll probably post on our Instagram before the podcast comes out.
I'm sure because I'm not going to do anything else today, but keep refreshing. Okay. So next week we have Silverstone. So the second of our 4 races in 5 weeks. This is another race I would
mention that Joe was actually in Berlin.
Oh, yes. Joe, the Beyond the Grid stuff. There wasn't a whole lot, but Joe was in Berlin attending the Special Olympics and handing out some medals and stuff there, which I love. I think the Special Olympics is a great organization. Way back in the day, I used to coach gymnastics for a team in San Diego, and it's amazing. So I love that Joe is out there working with those athletes as well. Amazing.
All right.
Okay. Silverstone, another race I would love to get to one day. It just seems like an absolute blast. So we've got 52 laps, 2 DRS zones. It's one of the fastest tracks on the calendar. So we're just leaving a fast track, going straight to another one. So hopefully we see a lot of the same, types of battles and everything. There's 2 really, really good overtaking spots. Village Corner, which kind of like leads into the DRS zone. There's 2, I don't know why I wrote down 2 areas. That's one area. The detection zone right before Maggots and Beckett's is another great area. Cars can do over 200. I don't know if this is kilometers per hour or miles per hour.
It's going to be miles per hour because it's usually 300 kilometers per hour.
Yeah, I'm guessing. Okay. So down the Hanger Straight during qualifying. So I think hopefully qualifying will have another exciting one. Last year at Silverstone, it was
this is the one he was upside down, right?
Joe was upside down in that one on the first lap. Terrifying, absolutely terrifying. I was beside myself when that happened. Carlos actually won his first race there, and then followed by Checo and Hamilton. But that's another one of those Ferrari things where they were trying to have Carlos stay behind Charles. And Carlos was on fresher tires. Charles was on very old tires. And they were telling him, nope, Carlos, we want you to stay and defend and keep a gap between Charles and everybody else. And he was like, stop inventing. It's one of the best quotes like ever. Stop inventing. Like, don't ask me to do that. And sure enough, like Charles, he couldn't keep up. His tires were old. So he ended up 4th. But very exciting race last year. I'm sure this year will be another very exciting race. Cannot wait.
I'm excited.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. There was so much to talk about, and I feel like we didn't even get to half of it, but Like
it was a crazy day. All right. Well,
really
like I said at the beginning, it was going to be a long ride. Appreciate everybody sticking it out, and we'll be updating you. And you guys will hear this after all the stuff hashes out from the penalties. So hopefully we'll find out. But you get a penalty. I get a penalty. Everyone gets penalties.
Penalties for everyone.
All right. Well, that was fun.
Yeah. We'll see y'all next week for Silverstone. Yay.
See ya. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And we're back. We weren't completely done because it's now several hours after the race, and we have an update to the Aston Martin challenge to the track limits. And wow, and you get another penalty, and you get another penalty. We have more penalties, change in race standings, change in constructor cups points, driver points. All right, Diane, I know you've got opinions. I've got opinions. Quickly, we're going to add a couple more minutes to our podcast.
Yes.
Keep that seatbelt on. Here we go.
So many opinions, because I find it very odd that when they came back after, I believe they said they had to review 1,200 track limit violations. They came back, and the same 7 or 8 drivers who had received track limit violation penalties during the race are the only ones who got additional penalties.
Yeah, K-Mag didn't get an additional one, but all the other ones did. You're right. But no one else. No new drivers.
No new drivers.
The ones who had them. And some doozies, because we have Ocon has 30 more seconds added.
They hate him. They after Australia or whatever that race where he just kept getting penalty after penalty. Oh my goodness. Carlos with 10 seconds, Lewis with 10 seconds, Pierre with 10 seconds, Alex Albon with 10 seconds. Esteban had 10, 20 seconds. Is that right? Because he already had some during the race. So 10, 20, 30 seconds.
30 seconds.
10. Nyck De Vries, 15. Yuki, another 5.
It changed up the order, completely changed up the order. So it moves Sainz down to 6, moving Lando up to 4th, Alonso up to 5th. Russell and Hamilton swap places. So we have Russell to 7th, Hamilton to 8th. Stroll and Gasly switch places, moves Stroll up to 9th, Gasly down to 10th. So that's all our at least point changes.
Amazing.
Wow.
Amazing. Because like you just said, it changes points for the drivers. So there's differences there. And then also for the constructors.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody had to change. Now, I don't think, I can't imagine, especially Checo, and I love Checo, but we were seeing him on F1 TV going over that line, and I cannot believe he only supposedly had 3 track limit violations in that whole race. And same with Charles.
Yeah, especially statistically. Okay, statistically, in the qualifying, 3 of the 47 laps that were deleted were Checo's. 3 of 47. And you're telling me out of the 1,200 possible issues that it came down to all of those ones that were marked as that they had to penalize post-race, that there were only those 7 drivers, no other new drivers were added into it, and Checo and Max were none of them, even though several of their laps, including 3 of Checo's, were deleted during qualifying.
Yeah. I find it insane. And when you have 1,200, and this does not add up the 8 drivers that got the additional penalties, and even when you include the penalties, the lap times during the race, you still have to have hundreds of lap time supposed potential violations that resulted in nothing. Hundreds of them. There has to be hundreds of them. How is that possible?
Yeah. And they're saying there's 1,200 potentials, so maybe none of them. They're saying that some of those weren't actual violations, but still
totally get it. Totally get that.
There should have been more drivers, and not just those 7 or 8 drivers. I mean, there's just
absolutely that's what I'm saying. Is there, of the 1,200, yes, totally get that there's got to be some in there that were not track violations, but that many of them, because we don't have anywhere close to with these 8 drivers, we don't. So I know we've mentioned this before, because online reading all the comments as this news started to come out, fans are mad They're mad. They're saying FIA is a joke. F1 is a joke. This is ridiculous. It was 4.5 hours after the race when we finally got this information. And I think at this point, we've said before, the FIA needs to be transparent in how they are determining these penalties. And I think kind of in a situation like this, you need to release a spreadsheet. We want to see every driver's name, who got a penalty for a lap violation, what corner it was on, and what lap. Because honestly, those internet super sleuths that have all day to figure stuff out need to go through and rewatch the dash cams from every driver and determine if that's correct or not correct.
It'll be interesting. All right. Well, we wanted to come back on. We're going to wrap up the podcast. So when we publish on Tuesday and you guys are hearing us, we'll have the most up-to-date information. So thanks again for sticking it around for the extra bump in the road on this ride. We do appreciate everyone. Wow. Just wow.
Just wow.
Wow. All right. Thanks all. Bye. See you again. Bye for sure this time. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe and leave a rating and a review. To stay up to date with She Loves the Grid and get all the behind the scenes content, you can follow us on Instagram at She Loves the Grid and on Facebook at facebook.com/She Loves the Grid. Thank you for joining us for the ride this week.